February 18, 2012, New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey. The world was saying goodbye to Whitney Houston, and inside that historic church, some of the biggest names in music had gathered to pay their respects. Stevie Wonder, Alicia Keys, R. Kelly, Cease Winans. Each of them had performed tributes that left the congregation in tears. But then something happened that no one expected. A woman nobody recognized walked to the microphone. She wasn't famous. She wasn't on the program. She was a 42-year-old single mother from Newark who cleaned hotel rooms for a living. And when she opened her mouth to sing, "I Will Always Love You," what came out was so powerful, so raw, so filled with genuine love that it stopped the entire funeral. Gospel legend B.B. Winans, who was sitting in the front row, later said it was the most honest performance of that song he'd ever heard, including Whitney's original. But here's what made everyone break down completely. This wasn't just a beautiful voice singing a tribute. This was a woman who owed her life to Whitney Houston. A woman whose story was so extraordinary, so impossible, that when the truth came out after the funeral, it changed how the world understood Whitney's secret life of generosity. If you're ready to discover the hidden moments that reveal Whitney's true legacy, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this story will show you that the greatest gifts are the ones given in silence. Let's dive into the day a stranger's voice revealed Whitney's biggest secret. Asterisk, her name was Angela Mitchell. And in February 2012, she was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Newark's Ironbound district with her 3 children. She worked the night shift at the Marriott downtown, cleaning rooms from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., then rushing home to get her kids ready for school before collapsing into bed for a few hours of sleep. It was exhausting, barely sustainable work. But it was honest, and it paid the bills. Barely. What nobody knew, not her coworkers, not her neighbors, not even her own children, was that 18 years earlier, Angela Mitchell had been someone completely different. In 1994, she had been Angela Rodriguez, a 24-year-old vocal performance major at the Manhattan School of Music with a voice that professors said came along once in a generation. She had been compared to Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan. Record labels were interested. A future in music seemed not just possible, but inevitable. Then everything fell apart in the space of 6 months. Angela's mother was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. Her father, unable to cope with the diagnosis, disappeared, leaving Angela to care for her dying mother while trying to maintain her studies. She dropped out of school to work full-time, but medical bills consumed everything. Her mother passed away 3 months later, leaving Angela with $87,000 in medical debt and a grief so profound she could barely function. The music that had once been her salvation became unbearable. Every note reminded her of her mother, who had been her biggest supporter and had sacrificed everything to pay for Angela's training. Angela couldn't sing anymore. Not in class. Not at church. Not even in the shower. The gift that had defined her entire life was suddenly locked inside her, inaccessible behind a wall of trauma and loss. By early 1995, Angela was homeless. She was sleeping in her car, a 1988 Honda Civic that broke down more often than it ran, and working whatever job she could find. Waitressing, house cleaning, anything that paid cash and didn't require an address. She was 25 years old with a world-class voice and a prestigious music education, and she was eating from dumpsters behind restaurants in Manhattan. That's when she met him. Marcus Mitchell was a construction worker, kind and steady, who found Angela sleeping in her car behind a diner where he regularly ate breakfast. He brought her food, never asked intrusive questions, and eventually offered her a place to stay. No strings attached. Just basic human decency towards someone who was drowning. They fell in love slowly, built on the foundation of Marcus seeing Angela's humanity when she could barely see it herself. They married in a small courthouse ceremony in 1996. Angela never told Marcus about her musical past. That person, the girl with the extraordinary voice and the bright future, felt like someone else entirely. Someone who had died along with her mother. By 1998, Angela and Marcus had 2 children, and life was stable if not comfortable. Marcus worked construction. Angela cleaned houses. They lived paycheck to paycheck, but they were making it work. Then in December 1998, Marcus was killed in a construction accident when scaffolding collapsed on a job site in Midtown Manhattan. Angela was 28 years old, 6 months pregnant with their 3rd child, and suddenly alone again with 2 toddlers to feed and crushing debt from Marcus's funeral expenses. The life insurance payout barely covered his burial. This time, Angela couldn't afford to stop functioning. She had children depending on her. So she worked. She worked 2 jobs, then 3. She cleaned houses during the day, worked retail in the evening, and took overnight janitorial shifts whenever she could get them. She survived on 3 hours of sleep and coffee and the iron determination that her children would not suffer the way she had suffered. For 14 years, that's how Angela lived. Working, surviving, getting her kids through school, never allowing herself to think about the music that still lived inside her, silent and aching. She never sang. Not even to her children. When they asked why, she told them her voice was broken. In a way, it was true. Then on February 11, 2012, Angela was cleaning rooms on the 14th floor of the Newark Marriott when she heard the news report coming from a TV that a guest had left on. Whitney Houston, one of the greatest voices of all time, has been found dead in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. She was 48 years old. Angela stopped moving. The spray bottle of cleaning solution slipped from her hand and hit the carpet. Whitney Houston was dead. The woman whose voice had been the soundtrack to Angela's life, whose music had been playing in the background of every important moment, was gone. But there was something else. Something that made Angela's chest tighten with a grief that went beyond normal fan sadness. Something that nobody knew. Something that had happened 17 years ago that Angela had never told anyone. A debt that could never be repaid. A secret that connected Angela Mitchell to Whitney Houston in a way that seemed impossible, but was absolutely true. And now Whitney was gone, and Angela had never said thank you. To understand what happened at Whitney's funeral, you need to know what happened in March 1995. What happened on the worst and best night of Angela's life. A night that she had kept secret for 17 years because Whitney Houston had made her promise to never tell anyone. It was a Friday evening, and Angela had been homeless for 3 months. She was parked in her barely functional Honda Civic behind a restaurant in Newark, trying to sleep before another day of searching for work, when 3 men approached her car. They had seen her there before, they said. They knew she had no place to go. They knew she was vulnerable. What happened next was every woman's nightmare. The men smashed her window and dragged her out of the car. She screamed, but the area was industrial and deserted at night. Nobody came. Nobody heard. Except someone did hear. A black SUV with tinted windows was driving past, probably lost and looking for the highway entrance, when the driver heard Angela's screams. The SUV screeched to a stop. A woman jumped out of the back seat and started shouting at the attackers. "Get away from her! I'm calling the police right now." The men, seeing witnesses and hearing the authority in the woman's voice, ran. Just like that, they disappeared into the darkness. Leaving Angela collapsed on the pavement, bleeding from cuts on her arms and face where the broken window glass had caught her. The woman who had saved her knelt down beside Angela and asked if she was okay. Angela looked up into the face of her rescuer and, despite her shock and fear, recognized her immediately. It was Whitney Houston. Not dressed for a performance. No makeup. No glamour. Just a woman in jeans and a jacket, looking concerned and real and human. "Oh my God, you're hurt," Whitney said, examining Angela's cuts. "We need to get you to a hospital." Angela, still in shock, just shook her head. "I can't afford a hospital. I don't have insurance. I don't have anything." Whitney helped Angela to her feet and guided her toward the SUV. "You're coming with me. We'll figure everything else out later." What happened over the next 6 hours was surreal. Whitney took Angela to a private clinic where a doctor cleaned and stitched her wounds. While the doctor worked, Whitney sat beside Angela, holding her hand, talking quietly to distract her from the pain. Whitney didn't ask invasive questions. She didn't judge. She just offered her presence and her kindness. When the doctor finished treating Angela's injuries, Whitney asked her a simple question. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" Angela, exhausted and overwhelmed, broke down completely. She told Whitney everything. About her mother's death. About the medical debt. About losing her music scholarship. About being homeless and terrified and barely surviving. And Whitney listened to every word with tears running down her face. When Angela finished her story, Whitney was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something Angela would never forget. "I'm going to help you. But I need you to promise me something. You can never tell anyone about this. Not the press. Not your friends. Not anyone. Because the moment people know I helped you, it stops being about you and starts being about me. And this is about you. Your life. Your future. Can you promise me that?" Angela, not understanding why Whitney would want to hide something so generous, nodded and promised. What Whitney did next changed everything. She took Angela to a hotel and paid for 2 weeks of room and board. She gave Angela cash to buy clothes and food. She connected Angela with a social worker who helped her apply for housing assistance. And most incredibly, Whitney set up a fund, anonymous and untraceable, that paid off every penny of Angela's $87,000 in medical debt. "I want you to start over with a clean slate," Whitney told her. "No debt. No shame. Just possibilities." Angela was speechless. She tried to refuse such an enormous gift, but Whitney was firm. "I've been blessed with so much," Whitney said. If I can't use those blessings to help someone who needs it, then what's the point of having them? Besides, I see something in you. Something special. I don't know what it is yet, but you're going to be okay. You're going to do something important with your life. Over the next month, Whitney checked in on Angela regularly. Always privately. Always away from cameras and public spaces. She helped Angela find a job. She helped her get into a transitional housing program. She even gave Angela her private phone number and told her to call if she ever needed anything. But Whitney maintained her rule. This stays between us. The world doesn't need to know. This is just two people helping each other be human. Angela, grateful beyond words, kept her promise. She never told anyone about Whitney's generosity. Not when she found stable housing. Not when she met Marcus and rebuilt her life. Not when her children were born. Not even after Marcus died and Angela found herself struggling again. She kept Whitney's secret because she had promised, and because she understood that Whitney's gift was even more valuable because it was given without any expectation of recognition or return. But Angela never forgot. She thought about Whitney constantly. She prayed for her. She followed her career with the love of someone who owed her entire life to this woman's kindness. And when she heard about Whitney's struggles with addiction, about the tabloid attacks on her personal life, about the cruel way the media treated her, Angela's heart broke. She wanted to defend her. She wanted to tell the world about the real Whitney Houston. The woman who had saved a stranger's life for no reason, other than it was the right thing to do. But she had promised. So she stayed silent. Then Whitney died. And suddenly Angela's promise felt like a burden rather than an honor. Because the world was talking about Whitney's problems, her struggles, her tragic end, but nobody was talking about her heart. Nobody was telling the stories about the lives she had touched privately, quietly, away from the cameras. Angela spent the week after Whitney's death in a fog of grief. Her children, now teenagers, noticed but didn't understand. "Mom, why are you so upset about Whitney Houston?" You didn't even know her. But Angela couldn't explain. She had made a promise. Even in death, she felt obligated to keep Whitney's secret. Then she learned that Whitney's funeral would be held at New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, the same church that Angela's mother had attended before she died. The same church where Angela had sung in the choir as a child, back when her voice was free and joyful and untouched by trauma. Angela knew she had to go. Not as someone who owed Whitney a debt, but as someone who loved her and needed to say goodbye. She didn't have a ticket or an invitation. The funeral was private, reserved for family and friends and industry people. But Angela went anyway. She stood outside the church on that cold February morning with hundreds of other people who had come to pay their respects from the sidewalk. And then something extraordinary happened. Inside New Hope Baptist Church, Whitney Houston's funeral was unfolding with all the dignity and emotion that such a moment demanded. The sanctuary was packed with family, friends, and music industry legends. Kevin Costner delivered a eulogy that had people laughing and crying simultaneously, remembering Whitney's grace and humor and talent. Stevie Wonder, Alicia Keys, and R. Kelly performed tributes that showcased Whitney's influence on generations of artists. Then Cease Winnan stood at the microphone to sing "Don't Cry for Me." The presence of the Holy Spirit in that sanctuary was undeniable. But there was also something heavy in the air. A sense that the tributes, as beautiful as they were somehow incomplete. The performances were polished, professional, befitting a superstar's funeral. But there was a distance to them. A formality. They were performances by people who knew Whitney the icon, but hadn't necessarily known Whitney the woman who rescued strangers in parking lots and paid off their medical debt in secret. Outside the church, Angela Mitchell stood among the crowd of fans and onlookers. She was crying, not just from grief but from frustration. She wanted to be inside. She wanted to stand up and tell everyone what Whitney had done for her. She wanted the world to know about the woman behind the headlines. But even now, even after Whitney's death, she felt bound by her promise of silence. Then one of the funeral organizers came outside looking stressed. The program was running long, and they needed to make adjustments. Some of the planned musical tributes would have to be cut for time. There was confusion about which performers were still scheduled and which had been canceled. That's when Angela heard herself speaking. She didn't plan it. She didn't think about it. The words just came out. "I can sing." The funeral organizer, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, who looked exhausted and overwhelmed, barely glanced at Angela. "I'm sorry, miss, but we already have all the performers we need." "I can sing. I will always love you," Angela said again, more firmly this time. "I knew Whitney. She helped me. I need to sing for her." There was something in Angela's voice. An urgency. An authenticity. That made Patricia actually look at her. "You knew Whitney. What's your name?" "Angela Mitchell. She saved my life 17 years ago. I made her a promise not to tell anyone. But she's gone now and I can't let her go without saying thank you." Patricia studied Angela's face. She saw the tears. She saw the genuine grief. She made a decision that had nothing to do with protocol and everything to do with intuition. Come with me. I can't promise anything, but let's see what happens. Inside the church, the service had reached a natural pause. Whitney's mother, Sissy Houston, was sitting in the front pew, her face a mask of grief and strength. She had already sung Bridge Over Troubled Water earlier in the service, and her performance had been both heartbreaking and transcendent. The loss of a child evident in every note. Patricia approached the pastor and whispered in his ear. He looked confused, then glanced at Angela standing nervously at the back of the sanctuary. He nodded slowly. Pastor Joe Carter took the microphone. Before we move to our closing tributes, I've been told there's someone here who has a testimony about Whitney. Someone who Whitney touched in a way that we didn't know about. I believe the Holy Spirit has brought her here today for a reason. The church fell silent. All eyes turned to the back of the sanctuary where Angela stood, still wearing her hotel work uniform because she had come straight from her overnight shift. She looked completely out of place among the glamorous celebrities and industry executives in their expensive funeral attire. Angela walked down the center aisle toward the front of the church. Every step felt like moving through water. Her legs were shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard, she thought everyone could hear it. She hadn't sung in 18 years. Not a single note. And now she was about to sing at Whitney Houston's funeral in front of Stevie Wonder and the woman's entire family. She reached the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. Sissy Houston was looking at her with curiosity and something that might have been encouragement. My name is Angela Mitchell, she began, her voice trembling slightly. Most of you don't know me. I'm nobody famous. I clean hotel rooms in Newark for a living. But 17 years ago, Whitney Houston saved my life in a way that went far beyond just physical rescue. Angela told the story. All of it. The attack in the parking lot. Whitney's intervention. The medical debt. The months of support. The secret that Whitney had made her keep. As she spoke, she could see the reactions in the church. Surprise. Confusion. Some skepticism from people who probably thought she was making it up. But Angela didn't care about convincing anyone. She was keeping a promise she had made to a dying woman's memory. Whitney made me promise never to tell anyone about what she did for me, Angela continued. She said it had to stay secret so it would be about me and not about her. And I kept that promise. For 17 years, I never told a soul. Not my husband before he died. Not my children, nobody. But standing outside this church today, I realized that keeping her secret after she's gone isn't honoring her. It's hiding her. The world needs to know about the real Whitney Houston. The woman who saw a stranger in trouble and didn't just call for help. She became the help. Then Angela looked directly at Sissy Houston. Mrs. Houston, your daughter gave me back my life when I had lost everything. And the greatest gift she gave me, even greater than paying off my debt or helping me find housing, was reminding me that my voice mattered. I was a singer before everything fell apart. I had trained at the Manhattan School of Music, but after my mother died, I couldn't sing anymore. The music was trapped inside me, and I couldn't let it out. Whitney told me that someday my voice would come back when I was ready. When I had something important enough to say. She told me my voice was a gift that was meant to be shared, not buried. Angela's voice was stronger now. Clearer. I haven't sung a single note in 18 years. But today, I'm ready. Because I have something important to say. I want to sing thank you to the woman who saved me. And I want to sing the song that was hers. The song that defined her. The song that showed the world what an extraordinary gift she had. The church was completely silent. Angela turned to the musicians. Can you play I Will Always Love You? The pianist, who had accompanied every performer that day, nodded and began the gentle opening chords. And Angela Mitchell, who hadn't sung since 1994, opened her mouth and let 18 years of silence break open. Asterisk the first note that came out of Angela. Mitchell's mouth was tentative, almost fragile. You could hear the rust of disuse, the fear of vulnerability. But it was there. The gift was still there, buried but not broken. If I should stay, I would only be in your way. As Angela moved through the first verse, something began to happen. The shakiness in her voice started to steady. The years of silence began to peel away. This wasn't a technical performance. It wasn't polished or perfect. But it was real in a way that cut straight to the heart. Angela wasn't singing to impress anyone. She was singing to say thank you to a woman who had seen her at her absolute lowest and had chosen to lift her up. Every person in that sanctuary could hear it. This was prayer disguised as a song. This was grief and gratitude wrapped in melody. When Angela reached the chorus, and I will always love you, her voice suddenly opened up fully. The years of training, the natural gift that professors had once said came along once in a generation, all of it came flooding back. Not perfectly. Not without cracks and imperfections, but with a raw emotional power that was absolutely devastating. Stevie Wonder, sitting in the third row, began to cry. Alicia Keys reached for the hand of the person next to her. R. Kelly closed his eyes and swayed slightly, recognizing that he was witnessing something sacred. But the most powerful reaction came from Cissy Houston, Whitney's mother, who had maintained her composure through the entire funeral, who had somehow held herself together through eulogy after eulogy and tribute after tribute, finally broke. Angela's voice, this stranger's voice, singing her daughter's signature song with such honest love and gratitude, was the thing that cracked Cissy's carefully maintained strength. She began to sob. Not quietly, not politely, but with the full-throated grief of a mother who had lost her baby. Bobby Christina, Whitney's daughter, who had been so numb with shock that she had barely reacted to anything during the funeral, suddenly came alive. She stood up from her seat and moved toward the front, drawn to this woman who was singing her mother's song with such raw authenticity. As Angela moved into the second verse, her voice grew stronger. The technique that she had spent years developing at the Manhattan School of Music was coming back, but it was now seasoned with life experience, with pain, with gratitude. With 18 years of silence finally being broken. Bittersweet memories, that is all I'm taking with me. Angela's voice cracked slightly on the word, memories. And instead of trying to hide it, she let it be. The crack made it more honest. More true. She was singing about memories. Real memories. The memory of Whitney's hand holding hers in that clinic. The memory of Whitney's voice telling her she was going to be okay. The memory of generosity given without expectation or recognition. When Angela reached the final chorus, the build that Whitney had made famous with her powerful belt, something unexpected happened. Angela was preparing to sing it alone, to pour everything she had into that final moment. But then another voice joined hers. Cece Winans, who had sung earlier in the service, stood up and began singing harmony with Angela. Then another voice joined. Kim Burrell, one of gospel music's most powerful vocalists, added her voice to the blend. Then another and another. Suddenly, half the church was standing and singing, "I Will Always Love You" together. Professional singers and regular people. Famous voices and unknown voices. All of them joining together in a spontaneous choir that filled the sanctuary with sound so powerful it seemed to shake the building. But Angela's voice remained at the center. Clear and strong and finally free. When the song ended, there was no applause. Just silence. The holy kind of silence that follows a moment of genuine spiritual power. Angela stood at the microphone, tears streaming down her face, and looked at Whitney's casket. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For saving me. For believing in me. For reminding me that my voice mattered. I will always love you." Then Angela turned to Cissy Houston. "Mrs. Houston, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your daughter was an angel in human form. She gave me back my life, and I will spend the rest of my days making sure that gift wasn't wasted." Cissy Houston stood up slowly and walked toward Angela. The entire church held its breath. What would Whitney's mother say to this stranger who had just shared such an intimate story and sung her daughter's most famous song? Cissy Houston embraced Angela Mitchell and held her tightly. "Thank you," Cissy whispered. "Thank you for showing me another piece of my baby that I didn't know. Thank you for singing from your heart." That's what Whitney would have wanted. Not perfection. Just truth. The two women stood together, holding each other. A mother who had lost her daughter and a stranger whose life had been saved by that daughter. Connected by love and loss and the power of a voice finally set free. As Angela walked back down the aisle to her seat, people reached out to touch her hand, to thank her, to acknowledge the gift she had just given. And in that moment, Angela Mitchell understood what Whitney had meant all those years ago. Her voice was meant to be shared. And today, she had finally shared it in the way that mattered most. Not for fame or recognition or career, but as an act of love and gratitude to the woman who had taught her that the greatest gifts are the ones given in secret, expected to never be acknowledged, but given anyway because kindness is its own reward. Asterisk the video of Angela Mitchell singing at Whitney Houston's funeral was never officially released by the family. The funeral was private, and the Houstons wanted to protect the intimacy of that moment. But several people in attendance recorded portions on their phones, and within days, a grainy video of Angela's performance began circulating online. The video went viral in a way that surprised everyone. Within a week, it had been viewed over 50 million times. People weren't just moved by Angela's voice, though it was undeniably powerful. They were moved by the story behind it. By the revelation that Whitney Houston had been secretly helping people for years, giving away her money and time and resources without any desire for recognition or publicity. As news outlets picked up the story, more people began coming forward with their own tales of Whitney's private generosity. a single mother in Houston whose rent Whitney had paid for 6 months when she was facing eviction. A young man in Los Angeles whose college tuition Whitney had covered anonymously. A family in Atlanta whose medical bills Whitney had paid when their daughter needed life-saving surgery. Story after story after story. All of them kept secret because Whitney had asked for privacy. All of them now being shared because people realized that Whitney's true legacy wasn't just her music. It was her heart. Angela Mitchell's life changed dramatically after the funeral. Record labels reached out, wanting to sign her. Television shows invited her to perform. But Angela turned down every offer that felt like it was exploiting her moment at Whitney's funeral. She didn't want to become famous because of Whitney's death. That felt wrong. What Angela did do was honor Whitney's memory in practical ways. She started a foundation called The Whitney Way that provided assistance to single mothers facing homelessness and debt. Using donations from people who had been moved by her story, the foundation paid off medical debt, provided temporary housing, and helped women get back on their feet. Just like Whitney had done for Angela. Angela also returned to music, but on her own terms. She began singing at church again. At community events. At benefits for causes that mattered. She used her voice not to become a star, but to serve others. Whitney told me my voice was a gift meant to be shared, Angela explained in an interview 6 months after the funeral. I'm finally understanding what she meant. It's not about fame or success. It's about using whatever gifts you have to make someone else's life a little better. Angela's children, who had never heard their mother sing before the funeral, were amazed to discover this hidden part of her identity. Her oldest daughter, Jasmine, later wrote an essay about the experience that was published in a national magazine. My mother spent 18 years silent, teaching us through her actions that strength sometimes means survival. Then she taught us through her voice that healing sometimes means letting go of old pain and embracing new possibilities. Both lessons came from Whitney Houston's kindness. The Manhattan School of Music, learning about Angela's story and her original scholarship, reached out to offer her a chance to complete her degree. At 42 years old, Angela enrolled as a part-time student, taking classes while continuing to work and raise her children. She graduated 3 years later with honors, proving that it's never too late to reclaim a dream that was interrupted by life's cruelties. Sissy Houston and Angela remained in contact after the funeral. They spoke on the phone regularly, with Sissy often calling Angela when she needed to talk to someone who understood Whitney's generosity. Talking to you helps me remember my daughter the way she really was, Sissy told Angela. Not the way the tabloids portrayed her, but the way her heart actually worked. On the first anniversary of Whitney's death, Angela returned to New Hope Baptist Church for a memorial service. This time, she was invited officially. This time, she sang Greatest Love of All, another of Whitney's signature songs. And this time, her voice was completely free, no longer trapped by trauma or fear, but released by gratitude and purpose. The story of Angela Mitchell and Whitney Houston became a teaching tool in unexpected places. Business schools used it as a case study in leadership and authentic generosity. Churches used it in sermons about serving others without seeking recognition. Psychology programs used it to discuss trauma, healing, and the therapeutic power of artistic expression. But the most profound impact was on individual people who heard the story and decided to help someone else in secret, without any expectation of acknowledgement. A movement began on social media called #TheWhitneyWay, where people shared stories of anonymous kindness they had performed or received. Within a year, thousands of stories had been shared. People paying for strangers' groceries, covering medical bills, offering housing to those in need. All of it inspired by Whitney's example of private generosity. Angela Mitchell's 3 children grew up understanding that their mother had been given a second chance at life by a stranger's kindness, and that this gift came with a responsibility to pass it forward. All 3 of them chose careers in service. One became a social worker. One became a teacher. One became a nurse. Our mother taught us that we're here to help each other. Angela's son Marcus Jr., named after his late father, explained. And Whitney Houston taught our mother. So in a way, we're all part of Whitney's legacy. Years later, when documentaries were made about Whitney Houston's life, Angela Mitchell was always included. Not as a footnote or a curiosity, but as evidence of who Whitney really was beneath the headlines and the struggles. The woman who saw someone in trouble and couldn't walk past without helping. The woman who gave without needing recognition. The woman whose heart was as extraordinary as her voice. People always talk about Whitney's gift, Angela said in a 2020 interview. They mean her voice, her talent. But Whitney's real gift was her ability to see people. Really see them. Not as fans or statistics or charity cases, but as human beings worthy of dignity and support. That's what she gave me. Not just money or help with debt. She gave me the gift of being seen and valued. And that gift changed everything. Today, Angela Mitchell is a voice teacher in Newark, working primarily with at-risk youth who have experienced trauma. She helps them find their voices, both literally and metaphorically, just as Whitney helped her find hers. Above her teaching studio hangs a photograph of Whitney Houston, smiling in one of her early publicity shots from the 1980s. Next to it is a simple handwritten sign that reads, "Your voice matters. Use it." The story of Angela Mitchell singing at Whitney Houston's funeral reminds us that the greatest legacies are often hidden. They're not measured in album sales or awards or headlines. They're measured in changed lives, in second chances given, in strangers helped without expectation of return. Whitney Houston will always be remembered for her extraordinary voice, for songs that defined a generation, for performances that took breath away. But for Angela Mitchell and the countless others whose lives Whitney touched in secret, she'd be remembered for something even more important. For seeing people in their darkest moments and choosing to be light. For using her resources not just to live well, but to help others live at all. For proving that true greatness isn't about how many people know your name, but about how many lives you change when nobody's watching. Angela kept her promise to Whitney for 17 years, maintaining silence about the generosity she had received. But when she finally broke that silence at Whitney's funeral, she gave the world something precious. The truth about a woman whose heart was as powerful as her voice. And in doing so, Angela's own voice, silent for 18 years, finally found its purpose. Not to become famous. Not to achieve the career that had once seemed inevitable. But to say thank you. To sing gratitude. To testify to the power of one person's kindness to change everything. I will always love you. When Angela sang those words at Whitney's funeral, she wasn't just performing a song. She was making a promise. To never forget. To pass forward the gift she had been given. To use her voice, finally freed, to help others find theirs. And in keeping that promise, Angela Mitchell ensures that Whitney Houston's true legacy, the legacy of her generous heart, lives on forever.